Hello. In this video, we're going to be talking about lab assignment number 4 over imagery. So we're going to basically start right here to talk about what imagery is. We're going to talk about the basic imagery files we're specifically talking about for this course, and then we'll look at the assignment and look at how that will work. So imagery, any component of a piece of communication that is not the text is considered imagery. So that can refer to the photographs, the icons, the infographics, the animations, the logos. Any of that is considered imagery. So visual communication relies on the use of appropriate imagery in order to communicate the message. So this type of imagery is used depending on the circumstance and the manufacturer of the final work. So anything that's being created, it's either going to contain two different things, either your text or your imagery. That's pretty much what's put together to create most things that we see. So we're going to look at the different types of images. Any image that's taken with a camera is a raster image. So a raster image is an image based off a bunch of little squares, which are called pixels. Those pixels look just like this. So if you take a picture and you zoom in really close, you're going to see little squares of color. That is what a raster image is. All those little squares are put together to create that image. So you can't scale that image up or down, because the bigger you make it, the bigger these squares are, and then the less detail that's going to be there, right? So you cannot enlarge a raster image because you're going to lose the resolution, because the resolution is the pixels per inch, and if you make that bigger, you have less pixels per inch, which means your resolution is going to be smaller, which means it's not going to look as good the bigger it gets, right? So that's what a raster image is. A vector image is created on a computer. So it's pretty much it's created on a computer with like something like Adobe Illustrator is a good example. Microsoft PowerPoint, when you're creating shapes, that is vector as well, because those are shapes that are created using mathematical calculations on the computer, right? So it's not a photograph that has little squares that are creating it. It is actually mathematical formulas and equations that are putting that together inside the computer. So the benefit of that is you can scale it up or down, and it's not going to lose the resolution, right? So you still need to be aware that depending on how it's exported out, you can have issues. But a vector artwork is great because you can scale it, you can make it bigger, make it smaller, and you're not going to lose the quality of it. Whereas with a raster image, you would lose that quality. Animation is another type, so it's like an advanced version of vector artworks, because it adds gradients and shadows and light to create a 3D image. So we're not going to look at that much, but we kind of want to talk about what that is. So that's best for online. You don't really print it that much because it's mainly best for being viewed on a computer screen. So which one would you use? So this is kind of just a basic example of kind of what the cost difference could be. Obviously, depending on who you know and what time it is, can make all this change, but this is just kind of a general look at it. So if you're wanting to do like a raster image for like a product, so let's say you work for a company and you want to create an advertisement and you want to have a photograph that is used, right? So you're either going to go purchase that picture, but more than likely you're going to want somebody to come out and take a picture of that specific equipment or that specific product or person or whatever it is. You want them to come out and take it. So that could be from like $600 to hire a photographer to come out and shoot it to over 10 grand or more. So you got to think about it. If it's a photo shoot, let's say you're going to have to take that picture somewhere, and it might cost to be at that location. You've got the equipment, so the camera. A lot of times, most photo shoots will bring in like a backdrop. Maybe they'll have like some high-end LED lights and things like that. All that costs money that the photographer would use. You then have, let's say you're going to have people in this picture. You got to a lot of times hire people to be the actors or the actresses in it. So you got to hire them. You got to hire somebody to come in to do their hair, their makeup, um, everything they're wearing. All that stuff kind of goes into it, and then you got to have somebody edit the pictures, and so all that kind of goes in. So sometimes having just a picture taken might be cheap, but it could get really expensive quickly depending on what you're wanting, right? If you want vector artwork, typically that's a lot cheaper because you're hiring one designer to create that image, right? So it could be from $50 if it takes them like an hour, right? Or it could be up to $500 or even more, just kind of depending on what it is, how detailed it is. But typically that's a lot less expensive because it's one person doing it, not multiple. And they don't have to rely on anybody else. They're just kind of creating it on the computer with whatever you're giving them. And then if you're going to do like an animation, obviously that's probably going to be the most expensive because it takes a lot of skill. First off, that person has to have a lot of skill to create that. So they're going to charge for that. Typically, when you're creating an animation, there's an initial investment because they've got to create that character or that product. And then depending on what angles and views and shots you want of it in the computer system will all kind of vary from there. But it's not something that happens quick. Typically animations, it takes them a while to put them together because there's a lot of work that goes into them. So those are typically the most expensive. But like I said, that all just kind of depends. That just kind of gives you an idea of what the differences are and kind of why you would use which one for what and kind of what the expenses could be for something like that. So here's an example of them coming and taking pictures of a product. This is kind of an example if you're wanting to hire somebody to create the vector artwork that you're looking for maybe for a website or for an advertisement. And this is like a 3D model that somebody would create for, let's say you're selling these laptops, right? You would have to have them create this so that you could have it like that. So for this assignment, we're just going to look at the raster images and the vector images. And you're going to find 20 raster images and 20 vector images. So we're not going to use any animated images or anything like that, just the raster and the vector. And you're going to put those together to kind of show what the difference is. So you're going to pick a theme for this. So let me actually take you to the assignment so we can see this. So number one, you're going to pick a theme. So an example, oil and gas, it could be animals, it could be a specific thing like a bicycle, it could be sports. You're going to find 20 vector images and then 20 raster images, so 40 total. And then you're going to either put them side by side or put all the raster images on one slide and vector on the other, however you want to do it. And you're going to kind of show the difference. So here's an example. So this is a vector image. Obviously this is not a photograph, right? It's a shape created in a computer. And then a raster image, this is actually a photograph of a real baseball. So vector, raster. The biggest thing and what a lot of people get wrong in this assignment is they don't label them. So they'll put all the vectors on one side, all the rasters on the other, but they don't actually put the text saying vector and raster. I know that you know the difference, but I don't know if you know which one is which, right? So make sure if you're doing it like this, which I would recommend kind of do it like this, that way you can go side by side to see them. Put which one's vector, which one is raster. That way I know that you know, right? So that's kind of a mandatory thing. You need to make sure you put a label on it. So if you can fit 2 or 3 on a slide, you can do that. I have a lot of examples under the assignment in Blackboard, so you can go look at those examples to kind of see what that would look like. Let me pull up one real quick because I have one right here to show you. Let's see. So here's an example. So this person picked oil and gas. That's their theme. So they put vector on one side, raster on the other. So this is an oil rig. This is a vector artwork version of it. Here's a photograph, which is a raster image. Oil, vector, raster, oil rig onshore. And then they just kept that oil theme going. So an oil bottle, fire on the rig, gas pump, and then they just kept going for all of those. So that's an example of what that would look like. But the big thing that's most important is they labeled which side is which. So there's always a couple people every semester that don't label it. So make sure you label it because I don't want you to get half the points off because you didn't label it, right? So, vector and raster. If you want to change your theme throughout, you can. So if you want like this first page to be one theme, and then the next page or next slide you want it to be a different theme, that's perfectly fine. I just want each picture to kind of be the same thing side by side. So fire on the rig, right? Gas pump, gas pump. So keep the images the same, just show the vector version and then raster. One thing to be cautious of is if you search vector versus like a raster versus vector images, sometimes it'll show you two of the same image side by side. Excuse me. I would suggest don't do that, because that's showing a different type of the quality. That's not actually showing what we're looking at, whereas this was created in a computer. This one is a photograph. They're looking at something a little different than we're looking at, and so that's not really correct for what we're doing. So make sure that you just find pictures that fit for vector and find that fit for raster, but don't find the little comparison things you see online. And when you look, you might see it, but that's not exactly what we're looking for. That's a little more technical in terms of the actual image. So make sure it looks kind of something like this. This was a good example, but just have the raster on one side, the vector on the other, and make sure you put the label. So that's what we're doing for this assignment. At the end of it, make sure once you have it saved, make sure you save it as a PowerPoint file, and then when you're done, go ahead and upload it to Blackboard as the assignment, just so that you have a backup copy, just in case if you lose it, if the file gets corrupt, anything like that, you'll have a backup there that we can get that for you, so you don't have to redo it. So that's the fourth assignment, and then when you're done, you'll also put that in your portfolio at the end of the semester. So that's what we're doing for assignment number 4. If you have any questions, make sure you email me. But if not, go ahead and get working on it.